Hey, good Thursday evening, everybody. Chief Meteorologist Brad Panovich here. Welcome into Live Weather Impact on this Thursday. It is now June 25th. We are flying through the month of June. Next week at this time, it will be a new month. It'll be July, and boy, is it going to be hot. So get ready for the heat starting to crank up. But it is Thursday, and you know what Thursday is. It's drought day. We get our drought monitor update every Thursday. It's kind of good news, bad news situation. Tim and I will probably talk briefly about this, but really no change in North Carolina. It was essentially like less than 0.1% difference. So all in all, about the same. There were some pretty good improvements down in parts of South Carolina. You could see some areas towards Savannah River Valley now in the area of abnormally dry conditions. That's the first time in a long time we've seen the lowest level of drought down there. So all in all, we just, no pun intended, we've been treading water as far as the drought is concerned. We're not getting better, but we're not getting worse. But that could soon change because the heat wave is going to be a pretty dry heat wave from a rainfall standpoint. And today was very dry. We've been dry this week. This morning, man, what an amazing morning. It was cooler this morning than it was yesterday, and it was so pleasant. 61 in Charlotte. Look at all the 50s, though. A lot of 50s, even in the outlying areas of Charlotte. The suburban areas were in the upper 50s. 87 was actually our official high because it came in at 6, so it came in after the climate data came in, but that's pretty close to normal. 61 this morning, not bad at all. Current temperatures, that's why I said it's 87. That's why it's our new high for the day. 87 degrees, high temperature for the day. Dew points are still low, so if you want to get outside, get a walk in, a bike ride, play with the kids, do it now. Because the dew points are going to start creeping back up as we go into tomorrow. Tonight, not nearly as cool as the last couple of nights. We'll be falling down into the 70s, maybe upper 60s, but no widespread 50s and low 60s like we've had the past couple of mornings. It is definitely going to be a much, much warmer start and a much warmer day tomorrow, closer to 90. Now, there's a 40% chance of scattered storms tomorrow. Will there be a lot of storms? Probably not. Will there be more storms on Saturday? Probably not, but for some reason, Storm Prediction Center has parts of our area, central and eastern North Carolina, in the medium risk. We're in the low risk. I would say the low risk is probably more warranted for the whole area because the coverage of the storms is going to be pretty isolated. Tomorrow, we'll see some scattered storms around this time. This is 3 o'clock. We'll go to 4, 5, 6 o'clock. You see the pop-up storms there around 7 moving out. So nothing too crazy. Saturday, there's the scattered storms, not many around, so you get the idea. It's probably not a huge risk. Just it's going to be one of those days where there's only like 2 or 3 storms, but 1, maybe 2 go severe. And damaging winds will be our primary concern. Lightning, obviously, brief heavy rain. Just to show you how isolated these storms are, rainfall really tells you the story. It doesn't rain everywhere, but if you're under one of these downpours, you could get a quick inch of rain. That's certainly a possibility in a summer storm pattern like this, but a lot of areas are going to get nothing at all. So I don't want to get everyone's hopes up. Just be lucky if you get a storm. And if you have outdoor activities, keep an eye in the sky. There's no washouts in the forecast. This isn't going to last long. These storms will be small. They'll last less than 45 minutes for the most part, and then they're out of there. But the dew points, the air you can wear is coming back. Now, I don't even buy Monday's drop there. I think it's going to be consistently mid to upper 60s, and that'll be key to just how sticky this air mass is going to be next week. But we're already in the extreme heat risk area. That means there's a 60% chance of much above average temperatures starting next Wednesday, but all the way through the weekend. So this is the 4th of July weekend. So we got a good old-fashioned heat wave, and even by our summer standards, which we're heading into the hottest time of the year, this is going to be hot. We're talking temperatures upper 90s to near 100 degrees, and it won't stop on Friday. It's going to keep going into the weekend. So 4th of July weekend is going to be toasty. A lot of folks spending time outside, so make sure you're being safe. Drink plenty of water, frequent breaks. I know there'll be other things being taken in, some adult beverages, some foods, a lot of outdoor activities, but just be safe because the heat will catch you off guard. Now, rainfall-wise, not a lot of moisture next week. We're looking at below average rainfall. So I'd love to tell you there's going to be some big thunderstorms to kind of break this heat wave. Not happening. It's really going to be one of those dry heat waves from a rainfall standpoint, but there will be plenty of humidity. So just be ready for that. And that kind of starts this weekend. The weekend forecast, hot, humid. We'll go 20, maybe 30% chance of a pop-up storm. Certainly nothing widespread this weekend. And that's going to feel cool compared to what's heading our way next week, because your Jerry Hunt Supercenter 7-day forecast shows the temperature just getting hotter and hotter and hotter as we go into next week. So by really Wednesday, maybe Tuesday at the earliest, but certainly by Wednesday, we're going to be flirting with triple digits. And I have 100 degrees on the forecast twice, which is something I don't often do this far out. And believe it or not, that's below what our guidance. Our guidance is like 101, 102. So one of the things about forecasting 100, it's pretty rare. We had it 4 times last year. It doesn't happen all the time. It snows more often in Charlotte by 4-to-1 ratio to 100-degree temperatures. But to get to 100, it has to be a little bit less humid, because humid air is harder to heat up. So in some cases, a 98, 97 with high dew points could be worse than 100 with a lower dew point, because the feel-like readings are about the same, about 105. We certainly could have heat advisories and excessive heat warnings in the forecast next week. And there's a pretty good chance, probably starting tomorrow, we'll have Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, possibly even Saturday as weather impact alert days because of the excessive heat. So just be ready. The heat's not sneaking up on us. We've been talking about it for days. So going alert now isn't going to be that big of a deal. We'll just kind of add it to our 7-day coming up tomorrow. We know it's going to be hot, and it's going to be sticking around for quite some time. All right. So coming up next, Tim Buckley's going to join me. We're going to talk about the earthquake, which we broke here live during live weather impact. It ended up being 2 earthquakes. We'll discuss a little bit of that. Talk about this heat wave. We'll talk about drought, and we'll also talk about severe weather, which is ongoing in other parts of the country. That's coming up in about 2.5 minutes right after the break.
Weather Impact Live with Brad Panovich is sponsored by Moisture Lock, crawl space, basement, and foundation repair experts serving the Carolinas since 1988.
Tired of all this rain? Does your yard look like a swamp after it rains? Hi, I'm Greg Doggett with Moisture Lock, Charlotte's premier waterproofing and foundation repair company. The longer water sits, the softer soil will become. This can cause foundation issues. If you're having drainage issues, contact Moisture Lock. We'll get the water away from your home and out of your yard.
Moisture Lock, stabilize, enhance, protect.
All right, welcome back, everybody. Tim Buckley joins me from WFMY. And Tim, good to see you on this Thursday. It's Thursday, as I mentioned, so I thought we'd start with the topic of the day on Thursdays, which is always the drought monitor. Came out today. I kind of looked at it as a good news, bad news kind of situation, Tim. It didn't get worse, but it didn't get better. So that's a win in some ways, because it kind of was the same as last week, which means we're not making any headway, but it's not getting worse, which I guess is a good thing.
That's a good thing. I'm a little more pessimistic on it because, just knowing what we know about what's coming down the pike, we're not going to have a week of rainfall like we just had, maybe for a little bit. And so our area got on average up here between about 2 and 5 inches of rain, which I thought was pretty good. And it didn't seem to move the needle much at all. So chatting with the state climate office, they said, sorry, you look at the lakes, you look at the streams and those type of things, they didn't really change. And so we can get all that rainfall, but if it's not making the impact that you'd like to see, then you're still in a bad drought. And of course we are, and the impacts are pretty clear. Boone, of course, is going to be moving forward, pushing ahead with some what seem to be pretty aggressive water restrictions, Brad. That's going to be taking effect, I believe, coming up on July 1st. So that's next week already. And we'll see what kind of other restrictions come down the pike for other cities and towns as we go through this over the next couple of weeks and couple of months.
Yeah, you make a good point, because even though the drought monitor stayed pretty stable, you're seeing a lot more municipalities, counties, cities are starting to lean into these water restrictions a little more. And I think that's all because they kind of know we're getting into July. It's a really hot month in general. Even if we had a normal month, Tim, there's water usage is pretty high in the middle of the summer. I think that's the one thing I think people take for granted. This time of year is when we use the most amount of water, because everything's growing. We're trying to stay cool. There's pools. There's a lot of outdoor washing. So it's just like, even if we had normal rainfall, there would be a lot of water usage and recreation as well when you think about all the boats and kayaking and canoeing. So I think these water restrictions are probably going to be becoming probably more strict if that is a possibility. The one in Boone is kind of shocking, Tim, because you think about the mountains. I mean, it kind of rains all the time there in the summer. That's the one spot you hopefully count on rain, and the fact that they're going to water restrictions really tells you it's probably getting pretty bad up there for them to go that far.
Yeah, and it was at the recommendation of, their public works staff and all these things. And if you go down the list, there's no watering of the grass, landscaping, gardens and parks, those kind of things. That they're not saying just water at night. They're saying don't water.
Yeah.
Don't fill up pools, these kind of things. And something that you might kind of see in some headlines as this kind of filters down. Washable dishes are discouraged at the restaurants, which means you might be using paper plates when you go out to eat. That's pretty visible.
Yeah.
They're also saying don't give people water just because it's the polite thing to do. Usually you sit down at a restaurant, they'll give you some, 4 glasses of water. They're not going to do that unless you ask for it. So those are just a couple of things on the list that you're going to notice if you're going up to the high country to visit coming up this fall, over the next couple of weeks. This starts on July 1st.
Yeah, especially for the holiday. I think that'll catch people off guard. They're going to have to make sure they ask for water. You're not just going to get it taken out to you. One lake we follow quite a bit in the Raleigh area, Falls Lake, which is their big water supply. I did notice that even like you said with the rainfall up in there, they didn't notice any increase really in the levels, which is really saying something, because that continues to trend down. And the pictures you see from Raleigh, I mean, it's crazy how low some of those lakes and reservoirs are over that way.
Yeah, and they didn't really have quite as good of a week as, my area did for rainfall. I know you guys didn't really either. But Raleigh, they've been really getting the short end of the stick quite often when it comes to this. So I wouldn't have been surprised if they even extended that drought a little bit farther over. But it's pretty bad. 7% of the state's in exceptional right now. On the flip side, South Carolina's, they look a lot different than they did a month or two ago. And Georgia, same thing. We don't cover them, but they really fixed their problem.
Yeah, the Arthur, the remnants of Arthur really did clobber area south. And really, that's the area, remember back in May, they got a ton of rain. So really since like the beginning of May, it feels like Georgia and parts of South Carolina have been actually getting some rainfall. It hasn't quite made it as far north as you until recently. Charlotte's got one glancing blow. It seems like, from Charlotte north into Virginia, those are the areas that just can't seem to buy consistent rainfall. Speaking of rain, though, we got to talk about this weekend. We chatted briefly offline of this. The Storm Prediction Center has us in a level 1, 2. We call it low and medium here at WCNC. I'm not too keen on this like being a huge risk. It's one of those weird situations. I have a 20 or 30% chance of rain Saturday, so it's not a huge chance of rain, Tim. But it's one of those things where we might see 1 or 2 storms, but one of them, or maybe 3 storms, or 1 or 2 of them could be severe. So it may be one of those things where there's not a ton of storms, but the 1 or 2 that can get going are severe, and certainly towards your area and Raleigh, it looks like a little stronger chance because there's a little short wave coming down. So if you're in central or eastern North Carolina, maybe the chance for a downburst could be a little heightened this weekend, even if the storm chances are pretty low overall.
Yeah, and so we're talking about Saturday here. Really, this pattern starts tomorrow, where you're going to start to see a couple of pop-ups yet again. So just to backtrack to Friday, these probably aren't strong or severe, but you'll see a couple popping up across the state. Still few and far between, so don't count on it. But I'll tell you, if you're going out, you still could get caught in these. So don't go out without your interactive radar on our apps, right? You want to be checking that pretty diligently. And then on Saturday, as Brad said, there's a chance of these. But still, a lot of us are going to end up dry this weekend both days. But if you get a storm, they could pack a bit of a punch, especially in eastern North Carolina. There's just a little bit of a trough swinging through, which is just an area of lower pressure that might be able to organize these a little bit more than they would be tomorrow. And it's a little hotter, so there might be more instability. But overall, doesn't seem like a huge risk or all that different than what we deal with on a typical summer day.
Yeah.
But again, probably the biggest thing for folks to remember, if you're outside doing your thing and you hear thunder, get inside right away. The big problems we had back on Monday here, the bad wind hit you 10 minutes before the storm. And so if you hear that thunder, that should at least be your clue. Check the phone, get inside. Well, get inside first, then check the phone is what you should do.
Yeah, that's a good point, because people, anytime you're outside, you just don't mess with these thunderstorms, because lightning just by itself is dangerous, even if the storm isn't severe. So we see this chance of strong storms this weekend, but the big story, and we're not going to bury the lead here, is going to be this heat wave next week, Tim. All the indications are you're starting to see the Weather Service, the Weather Prediction Center, everybody kind of starting to highlight this. I pulled this graphic out from the extreme heat risk graphic from the Weather Prediction Center, and they have our area and really a big chunk of the eastern part of the country in this, what they call a high risk for extreme heat, 60% chance of abnormally high temperatures, and that usually means about 10 degrees above average. And you'll hear this all the time. It's summer, it's supposed to be hot. Well, not this hot. And when it's above normal this time of year, when it's already hot, this means it's really hot, Tim. And I think the heat wave for us, and I know for you got it starting really on Wednesday. I could see Tuesday being pretty steamy, but for us, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, I got us near triple digits. And even on the 4th of July, we're going to be pretty close to that. There's a 4-day stretch there, Tim, where I would suspect we're probably going to have heat advisories at a minimum and maybe excessive heat warnings. It's always kind of tough getting to 100 degrees, and I said this in my local forecast. If we have more humidity, we probably don't get to 100, but it could feel just as bad, because 97 or 98 with a 70-degree dew point is just as bad as 100 at like a 68-degree dew point or 67. So it's kind of splitting hairs. It's either going to be super hot with a little bit of humidity or super humid and super hot, and it's all going to equal probably 105-degree feel-like readings.
Yeah, it's really hard to communicate that point, but you're right. It's either one or the other, and they're both about just as bad.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where we're going. And it does seem, sometimes often we talk about when you get in that 7 to 10 day range, there are a lot of details we don't know, a lot of uncertainty. I don't think there's a lot of uncertainty here.
Yeah.
We know there's a heat wave coming. The weather pattern seems to be very stable and very clear that you're going to have this big heat dome or ridge of high pressure over the eastern third of the country. And there's not a lot of wiggle room with that. So we know it's going to be hot. It's probably going to be dry as well, starting on Tuesday, Wednesday, and you're going to be stuck with it for about 4 to 5 days. And we can hem and haw about 99 versus 101, but what's the difference? It's going to be really hot, and you're going to have to change your behavior. Do things differently, limit time outside, listen to your body, not be doing yard work at 2 in the afternoon. Those are things that are going to be baked in, and it really might impact, the 4th with celebrations and things like that, because it's going to last through that weekend, I think.
Yeah, you think about 4th of July. A lot of people spend a lot of time outside, hopefully at a pool or a lake, but that's still, it's hot. A lot of parades, Tim, right? People, I think about marching bands, in these parades, full, marching band attire and, veterans and stuff. I mean, there's a lot of celebrations. This is 250th, here. So there's going to be a lot of people outside. So this heat's going to hit a little bit different. So it's a good idea. Just people take precautions, please. I know it seems kind of common sense, but seems like every year when we get into these heat waves, people, have issues. And this is a good time now, Tim, before the holiday. Check that HVAC system. Call in an HVAC guy on the 4th of July is probably not going to be the most ideal time. It's a holiday and everybody else is calling. So maybe this weekend would be the time to maybe go clean out the outside unit, check your filters, and just maybe if you do have a good HVAC guy or gal, call them and say, hey, come on over. Can you give me a checkup before we get to the holiday weekend, just in case?
Yeah, there are times I'm glad I do this show with you because you're reminding me of things I have to do myself because that's something I need to get taken care of probably tomorrow before we get into the middle of next week because I've had an HVAC problem on July 3rd before. It's not easy to get taken care of, to be sure. And you're right about the marching band stuff. As a recovering band geek, or I guess a lifelong band geek myself, my high school, we marched in the 4th of July parade in D.C. one year. Oof. That thing's right in the middle of the day. It's a great parade. You go by the memorial, you go by the White House, all that kind of stuff. We had about 4 or 5 players fall out because, they just couldn't go on with the heat. And these are things that you've got to think about. Staying hydrated. Drink way more water than you think you need to if you've got to be out for these type of things.
Yeah, and it is a good point because I think just, people always heat's a hidden killer, man. It's the number one thing. Other than rip currents, which is another hidden danger when people go to the coast, people just take it for granted. It always catches them off guard. So we're trying to not beat a dead horse here, just tell you that you got to be safe. It's just something that we see personally every year that becomes a big problem. So we got to talk about yesterday's earthquake, Tim, which you broke right here on this show. And lo and behold, we go back and look. It was a doublet, this double earthquake, which was kind of interesting, Tim. I haven't seen one of these in a while. When I first saw the 7.5 come in, I'm like, wait, is that the same quake? Did it get upgraded? And I'm like, no, this is 2 separate quakes. And it really is fascinating from a seismology standpoint that the first quake probably triggered the second one. And when I was reading some of the technical details, and they made a really good point. USGS did a great write-up on their site about this being just not a point like an epicenter. It was like a pretty long shift in that fault. So it was over an elongated area, but widespread shaking in parts of Venezuela. We talked about this yesterday. Very vulnerable population. Also a lot of liquefaction, which is where the ground kind of acts like quicksand when it shakes. So there was a lot of destruction. I don't think we fully have heard all of the destruction from that area yet, but it sounds like it's pretty bad down there.
It does, and everything you just said, it kind of explains a little more. We were hearing of all these bad reports coming in from Caracas, and if you looked at the epicenter, it's pretty far away, close to 100 miles initially anyway. So if it's an elongated zone, that kind of makes more sense. Yeah. And it was interesting, our meteorologist, Alex, he was researching this a little bit earlier. He found a paper, or at least a write-up, from folks up at Penn State, I guess. This is in 2021, and they were saying how that western edge of the fault line there is kind of overdue for a big one. They said the eastern one had been, moving around a little bit, but that part had been pretty static, and so it was building up more unreleased energy, and so that would maybe lean to the effect of that first one triggered the second one, 2 different snappings of that fault.
Yeah, so it's the Caribbean plate is sliding to the east, and the South American plate is sliding to the west. And you're right. I looked back at the history. This is the biggest quake in that part of the fault on record. But on the eastern part of that fault, which is on the closer to Caracas, there have been 7.0s and 7.3s, but they were kind of more offshore, more in the Caribbean. This is by far the strongest to be in the mainland, if you will, of Venezuela. So yeah, I just really think about those people down there. And the U.S. is sending aid. A lot of other countries are sending people down there to help out. Yeah, Caracas is pretty far east, but it's all about the shaking. If you get that quake there and it shakes that whole area, I saw on the felt report, which is something you could see on the USGS site, they felt it all the way up into parts of like Cuba and Puerto Rico, even areas of the Caribbean, and even as far west as like the Yucatan Peninsula. So there was shaking all across that part of the world. It just goes to show you that sometimes when you get these big quakes, they can be felt over large areas.
Yeah, huge regional event. And like we said on the show, there's multiple around the world yesterday, but this is the big one that really will have lasting impacts that we'll keep covering for you for weeks and months probably.
Yeah, probably a big humanitarian issue that's going to be ongoing. Real quickly, Tim, I just focused. There's a lot of severe weather going on today as well. We have severe weather up in the Ohio Valley into Pennsylvania, and also, once again, the Southern Plains. It's weird. The summertime, you think the severe weather kind of shuts off, but here we go. We've got severe weather. It feels like it's going on just about everywhere. We've had some tornado warnings. Currently none up here on the Ohio-Pennsylvania border, right around the Pittsburgh area, Youngstown, Wheeling, West Virginia area. But then we go out in the middle of the country, and we've seen some pretty big tornadoes. At least I saw one on camera in parts of Oklahoma. This one's east of Tulsa. Pretty active storm there. We had a really nasty storm back here in the panhandle of Oklahoma, and there's this tornado warning there as well. Softball-sized hail. Seems like there's been some big hailers the last couple of days, Tim.
Yeah, it's kind of like you said. It's amazing to watch these things, and just look at the radar. There are hundreds of lightning strikes, the big hailstones. Did you see the video out of Green Bay yesterday, where it basically looked like they got hit by a tropical storm or a hurricane?
Yeah.
It was like a storm surge video, but it was just flooding from there, and they had all these hailstones kind of floating on top. It's really been busy, and the poor Midwest, like you said, they keep getting hit. Oklahoma's still dealing with their season. It's not wanting to go migrate up into Canada, I guess, like it usually does by the end of June.
We'll see. This ridge that builds in next week might shut all this off, and we'll start watching MCSs or thunderstorm complexes over the northern plains, and that'll be something we'll have to pay attention to next week, depending on the ridge. But yeah, like the Dakotas, the Great Lakes will get in on that storm track. So yeah, we call that a death ridge, and usually if you're a storm chaser, you call it a death ridge because it shuts off all the storm activity, and that's kind of what's going to be setting up next week. And some farmers refer to the death ridge for a different reason, unfortunately, because of the heat and drought that it can bring. So next week will be an interesting week. So Tim, almost out of time here. I know you guys are weather impact alert next week. We're probably going to do the same, but we really got to get people ready for this heat wave starting next week, don't we?
I think so. Hope for a little bit of rain this weekend, and then, buckle up because it's going to be hot and dry for a long time going into the 4th.
Yeah. All right, everybody. We'll see you back here tomorrow. Have a great night. We've got more news coming up next.